In today's video, we're going to be discussing the 4 rotator cuff muscles, their origin, insertion, function, and then we're going to take a short quiz to see just how well we're holding on to this information. If you ever hear somebody say that they tore their rotator cuff, your very first question should be which one? And I can almost guarantee that they will not know, or at least that has been my experience, and there's a whole plethora of reasons why they might not know. But at the end of the day, it's important for us to understand that there are 4 of them. Now, one of them is actually mostly injured, right? That's the most commonly injured one, and we're going to see which one that is. But we still want to discuss all 4 of the rotator cuff muscles. And to absolutely no surprise, they're going to be all essentially involved in some kind of rotation. Where is that rotation going to be? Well, it's going to be in the shoulder. Right, so this muscle here is the subscapularis, and you were looking at an anterior view of the shoulder joint. More specifically, it's even the shoulder girdle. You can see the clavicle as it turns into the scapula, and then we have the humerus, and everything you see here in green is the subscapularis. Now, when you break that name down, subscapularis, right? Sub means below. Scapularis is in reference to the scapula. It makes you wonder, like, how on earth is this below the scapula? It sure looks like it's in front of the scapula. Well, you have to understand, you are not the only creature with a subscapularis. And humans are weird. You walk on 2 feet, you're bipedal. Most creatures are quadrupedal. So think like a bear. If you're a bear and you're on all 4s, the scapula is not oriented from front to back, it's oriented from up to down, right? Superior to inferior. And so in that sense, this muscle would indeed be underneath the scapula. So it's a really good name, just doesn't really work well that much for you. Now, since it is going to be in front of the scapula in the human being, that means that it's crossing the shoulder joint anteriorly. And that's going to be important for its function. You see, this muscle is strongly anchored to the entire anterior surface of the scapula, which is called, and this is its origin, the subscapular fossa. And it does that, we're talking the whole thing it's anchored to. And then when it crosses anteriorly, it's going to insert on what's known as the lesser tubercle of the humerus. Tubercle just means bump. And so you have a greater tubercle, which we're going to see for the next 3 muscles, spoiler alert. This is the oddball of the rotator cuff muscle group because it's the only one that inserts at the lesser tubercle. Now, the lesser tubercle, if you wanted to palpate it on yourself, just don't do it too aggressively, it'll hurt, is going to be on the anterior part of your humerus, right? So as you're just naturally resting, it's going to be about right where I'm poking. And so this is going to cross there. And then I want you to just think about it. Okay, well, what if this muscle contracted, right? If these fibers were to shorten, what would happen to this lesser tubercle? Well, it is going to rotate internally or medially, right? The action of the subscapularis is internal rotation of the shoulder. And so what that looks like, if you just kind of go like this, right? You kind of stick your arm out in front of, like you're shaking someone's hand. And then with your other hand, I want you to hold onto the humerus, and then I want you to rotate this hand toward your abdomen. As you do that, you should be able to feel the humerus rotating. That is what we call internal or medial rotation of the shoulder. And that is the action of the subscapularis. And it goes to show just okay, this is the rotator cuff muscle group. Rotation is definitely going to be involved, right? So we have medial or internal rotation for this muscle. So then from there, we now move to another muscle called the teres minor. So teres means round. And so this muscle is kind of tubular. If you could pull this out, say you're doing a dissection, it'd be kind of tubular. And then minor is because, well, it's small, but it's small in comparison to what? Well, there is a teres major. That teres major is in a different muscle group. It's called the intertubercular groove muscle group, which is a tongue twister, and I have to say. But we'll discuss that in a future video. And for right now, I just want you to understand this one is part of the rotator cuff muscle group. And so where it originates is on what's called the lateral border or the lateral margin of the scapula. So to best understand this is a posterior view of the shoulder. Again, more specifically the shoulder girdle. We can once again see the clavicle as it transitions into the scapula and then the humerus. So if we're looking at this sharp point here is called the superior angle of the scapula. And then this sharp point down here is known as the inferior angle of the scapula. Well, on this ridgeline, running from the superior angle to the inferior angle is what's known as the medial border. Well, if they took the time to say medial border, there needs to be a lateral border. And you can't see as much of it because teres minor is blocking it. But teres minor originates on this lateral border of the scapula. And then what it does is it crosses the shoulder joint posteriorly. And what it's going to do is insert here on the greater tubercle. Now, the greater tubercle is massive. It's not inserting on the entire greater tubercle, but we can still say this is going to be inserting on the greater tubercle. That is going to be fine. Now, since this is on the posterior side of the shoulder joint, that means it is going to have a different action than the subscapularis did. You can't be on the opposite side and have the same action. And so what this is going to do is what's known as external or lateral rotation of the shoulder. So if we go back to that same like hand shaking position, you go ahead and feel with your humerus with your opposite hand. Then I want you to do is rotate your shoulder. You know, it's kind of like you're just going like, ha, like you're surprised or something like that. That is external or lateral rotation of the shoulder. And that is exactly what the teres minor is going to be performing. So this is going to be, again, originating at the lateral border, but then inserting at the greater tubercle and performing external rotation of the shoulder. So then we meet the supraspinatus. And this is the most commonly injured rotator cuff muscle, right? So in this strange scenario where someone's telling you, well, maybe not so strange. I don't know if you're a clinician or not, but let's just say like someone's just telling you they tore their rotator cuff. Chances are this is the one they tore. I can't remember the statistics off the top of my head, but I do know this is by far the most likely to have torn. And it's for a variety of reasons. One of them, you can see this muscle is running underneath this portion of the scapula here known as the acromion. The acromion or acromion process, which you can feel. Acromion translates to peak of the shoulder. It's just the hard bony part that you can feel on your shoulder. So supraspinatus runs right underneath it. And so there is a bursa that is going to try and limit this, but I want you to imagine how much friction has to be occurring in this region just through natural shoulder movement. I'm not even talking just the action that it performs, which we will discuss in a moment, but I mean just literally being in this area is treacherous. I mean, there's a lot of friction that can happen. And it's very possible that it can start to get irritated and just get worn down over time. That's just the way it goes. But at the same time, it's always in use because the supraspinatus is like literally grabbing onto the humerus here and like just providing tension, trying to keep your entire shoulder in the socket. It's an important function of it that we don't have the time to really get into the details here, but this muscle, in fact, all of the rotator cuff muscles are really important, not just for their action, but for just literally holding on to the humerus and going, hey, humerus, don't dislocate. Because, I mean, you have a very mobile shoulder joint, and that mobility comes at a consequence, and that is a loss of stability. And so these muscles exist to kind of suction and traction it in there. And part of that means that the supraspinatus is always working. And so since it's always under tension, it's always in this high friction environment, it's very likely to be torn. But let's discuss the muscle itself, all right? So this muscle is going to originate on this entire surface here of the scapula. So if you could remove the muscle, you would see there's this ditch. And I say ditch intentionally because this is what's known as the supraspinous fossa. Fossa translates to ditch. So this is the ditch that is superior to the spine. And that's what this bony prominence is here. This is what's known as the spine of the scapula. So we have a ditch that is just above it. Supraspinous fossa, fantastic name. And the supraspinatus is going to originate in that. And then it's going to travel on top of the physical shoulder joint. So we're superior to the shoulder. And once again, it is inserting on the greater tubercle. That's this chunk of bone here. And so what it's able to do based on its leverage then is going to be performing abduction of the shoulder. What does that look like? Abduction, so I'm going to go ahead and just turn like this. Abduction is where your shoulder is going away, right? Like this. So it's lifting away. I always think of like being abducted by aliens, being taken away, because abduction means you're going away from the midline. So in this instance, imagine there is a midline running down the center of your body. What's going to happen is supraspinatus is going to bring you away. Now, you could do all the way up here. That is all technically abduction of the shoulder. However, supraspinatus cannot do that much. In reality, it only does the first about 15 or so degrees of shoulder abduction. Then what's going to happen is a whole series of events where deltoid takes over, trapezius and serratus anterior take over. It's pretty cool when you break down the biomechanics of the shoulder movement. But still, supraspinatus is what's known as an initiator. An initiator means that it is the one that kickstarts the abduction movement. And then other muscles, stronger muscles, will take over. But this is such a small and short muscle, and it's under so much tension, but it has to lift so much in order to bring your entire upper limb into that abducted state. That is yet another reason why it is very commonly injured. It's just, it has a big weight on its shoulders. I don't know. I wasn't planning that, but that's exactly what it is. All right, so supraspinatus is going to perform abduction, or the first 15 degrees of abduction. All right. And then our last, this is it. Our last of the rotator cuff muscles is this one here called the infraspinatus. And so if we took the time to say supraspinatus, which by the way, now we can actually see that supraspinous fossa here. That is going to be all of this location here now that supraspinatus has been removed. Infraspinatus would be doing the same thing. There is an entire ditch that is inferior to the spine of the scapula, which is why we can say that the infraspinatus originates on the infraspinous fossa. So supraspinatus, supraspinous fossa, infraspinatus, infraspinous fossa. And what it's going to do is, once again, it is traveling posterior to the shoulder joint. And it is also, once again, inserting on the greater tubercle. And so, just like we saw with teres minor, when infraspinatus contracts, it is going to perform external or lateral rotation of the shoulder. So teres minor is just this one, and infraspinatus are synergists to each other. They're agonists. They work together to perform a very similar action. In fact, it's going to be the same action. Now, they pull on the shoulder in slightly different ways because they have different leverage, but still it is going to be external rotation of the shoulder. So we have infraspinous fossa to the greater tubercle, and it performs external rotation. All right, so that is going to be the rotator cuff muscles. Now what I want to do is take a quiz. Now, we have been using a 100% free Kenhub article, and what's nice is in the articles, you can see I've already done one. Granted, I did it 9 months ago, but still, I mean, it's nice. It's nice that it kind of retains that information. What's nice is that in our 100% free Kenhub articles, we also give you the option to take quizzes. Now, quizzes are a premium feature. However, I want to show you just how amazing these quizzes can be. So what we're going to do is, now granted, this is going to be an overview of the muscles of the arm and shoulder. There's going to be more included in this, but I actually want to show you that intentionally. I want to show you that, like, one of my favorite ways to learn with Kenhub is to discuss something very specifically. So like, for example, we just discussed the rotator cuff, and then go and take a quiz, which is going to include what you just learned and more. And the reason why I think this is so powerful, I can kind of talk about this as we do this. I'm going to click study session, and then we're going to reduce it to just 5 minutes. Study session quizzes, these are using spaced repetition, which is just a really amazing way to learn your anatomy. Basically, it shows you a question, and then it'll show you that again, but in a slightly different way, and then again in a slightly different way, and it just gives you more exposure to the information. So I'm going to go ahead, and we're going to start this quiz. But when you are learning anatomy, I'm actually going to push pause here, which is a nice feature that you could do with your quizzes, is when you're learning anatomy, you don't want to just always learn about these structures or regions by themselves in isolation. It's nice to be able to put that together in a global picture, or at least a larger picture, and just see how it works with other muscles. So go ahead and push play. All right, so what we can see here is it is asking supraspinatus muscle. It wants us to identify the supraspinatus. All right, so which of these? I'm going to give you just a brief moment to think to yourself. You're welcome to pause this and see if you can figure out where the supraspinatus is yourself. The answer is going to be right here. So I'm going to go ahead and click this, and it is going to move to the next one. Now, what's cool is I can actually go back, and if we wanted, we could look at these more, and you can even click on these eye icons, which can give you more images that you can go through. You can see this really cool one where you can see just different tissue, like the glenoid labrum, for example. This is a different view. It's kind of like you took off the humerus and you're staring at the inside of the shoulder. Really, really cool view. But you can go through here, cycle through, see medical images. Really, really cool. But we don't have time for that because we are taking a quiz here. So, all right. It is now asking for the infraspinatus muscle. So where is infraspinatus? Again, I'll give you just a moment to try and guess yourself. Yes, this is going to be the infraspinatus. Again, inferior to the spine of the scapula. All right. So now it is asking for teres minor. Now, what's interesting is it's also showing a muscle that we have not discussed, but I kind of talked about it, but we didn't really look at it. So which of these would you guess, or do you know, to be the teres minor? The answer is going to be this one. Now, it is, yep, I'm not going to go back because now it is asking and it's going to answer what that other one was, the teres major muscle. And I mentioned this earlier on in the video. This is going to be the teres major. So we just saw teres minor, again, off that lateral border and going to the greater tubercle. This is the teres major. Tubular, part of the intertubercular groove muscle group, along with pectoralis major, latissimus dorsi. But this is not the muscle we're focused on for the rotator cuff, but it is the answer to this question, the teres major. All right. So now, which image shows the subscapularis muscle? Again, I'm going to let you tackle this one. Give you just a brief moment. Yes, it's going to be this one. However, it is now, well, maybe not right now, but it will come back and ask the other one. But here, I'm going to go back to it. I want to see if you can take a mental note. Any ideas as to which muscle it is showing here? We'll come back to it, hopefully. We have 2.5 minutes. It'll probably pop up. But if it doesn't, I will tell you what it was. All right, so teres minor, again, so this is showing the spaced repetition because you're like, we already answered what teres minor is. Well, now you're seeing it with 4 images instead of 2. And again, studies have shown this is one of, if not the best way to learn anatomy or learn information in general through spaced repetition. So, teres minor, what's it going to be? This one. Yes. All right, so now, and here it is. Which image shows deltoid? I got to quit ruining these. Yes, this is a deltoid. Specifically, this is the anterior deltoid. So I'm going to click on this. Because this is showing you posterior deltoid, and then there is also a middle deltoid. Again, wasn't the focus of this video, but it is nice to be able to learn it along the way. All right, and now we see a different form of these questions. So what is this? Is what the question is asking, and it's showing a muscle. So I want you to think to yourself, what is this going to be? And then we will answer it. This is the supraspinatus. Now, what's nice is it's showing 3 of the rotator cuff muscles, but it is adding in an oddball who is not a rotator cuff, but it's only odd to us, not odd to the quiz, because we were focused on the rotator cuff while it's focused on the entire shoulder area. So, teres major. All right, so where is teres major? That is going to be this one right here. All right, subscapularis. It's asking it again. But now you're seeing 2 new images that we have not seen before, which makes this subscapularis. What is this muscle? I'll give you a brief second. In fact, we have like 35 seconds left, so we got to go fast. Who is it? Infraspinatus. Yes. All right, and then deltoid muscle. Real fast. This one. Going super fast. Which image shows the coracobrachialis? All right. This is up to you. What's it going to be? Because both of these muscles you have not seen before. That is this one here. And then we have time for one more. Which image shows the biceps brachii? Yes, that is going to be this muscle right here, the biceps brachii. And that is it for our quiz. Now, what's cool is when the quiz finishes, maybe it's because I paused it. Oh, it's because I forget. It's nice is it makes sure you finish the last question. So we have one more. So which image shows brachialis? So which image shows brachialis? It's going to be this one right here. Just so you know that what it's also showing over here is the triceps. What happened was if you do not finish, it gives you time. So let's say like even though we've reached the 5 minutes, it gives you the time you need to finish that last question. As soon as you click it, we got it right. Now the quiz is going to finish and tell us how we did. Awesome. we did very, very well, which is great. Now, then also with our articles, you can see it shows like clinical aspects. It kind of describes some of the clinical anatomy or relevant clinical anatomy or clinical conditions associated with the rotator cuff. But again, this is a 100% free Kenhub article. The quizzes are not 100% free. This is a premium feature, but please feel free to explore this because this is a fantastic way to learn. But we're going to go ahead and leave a link down in the description below so you can explore this yourself. But our hope is that you learned something about the rotator cuff muscle group today. Remember, only one of them is the most commonly torn. While it is technically possible others got torn, we know the supraspinatus is probably the one that got torn. Now, if you really enjoyed this video, please do us a favor and go ahead and give it a like. It's a tiny gesture, but it actually goes a long way in this video performing better, and then more people can learn about the incredibleness that is the human body. Also, while you're down there, go ahead and leave us a comment. Let us know what you'd like us to discuss in future videos. We're always wanting to give you what you want, not just hope that we're giving you what you want. But again, thanks for hanging out with me. I really, truly appreciate it, and I will see you next time.